All right, folks, it's another Wednesday night, so welcome to SEC Breakdown. It's our 10th edition, talking football 24/7, 365 with the best, the very best around the conference. And tonight that means Chad Neipling and also David Waters along with myself. Mark Rogers, SEC Breakdown. Please join us on Twitter. That's the deal. We've got over 10,000 followers. Need you on board as well. Because we talk about the SEC each and every day, focus on football, but certainly you get your fill of basketball this time of year with Texas A&M hanging in there in March Madness, and also the softball and the baseball as we enter spring. So we've got David, we got Chad on the line. Hey, boys, how's it going?
It is going good.
Very good. Thanks, Mark.
And you
Very
mentioned
nice,
baseball,
very
softball,
nice. So
yeah,
we
the
had
Gators
Kirby
have
Smart,
one.
Georgia head coach, first year in Athens, making some comments this week concerning a coach having the ability when a player wants to transfer to be able to put the old kibosh on that and say we've got some considerations to make. So that has caused a bit of an uproar around the college football world, as in my opinion it should. So Chad, let's start with you in regards to your thoughts about Kirby Smart's comments and where do you think they come from, and what do you think's the right and wrong here?
Here's the thing, man. I kind of teeter on this, and I see both sides of it, Mark. I know David and I, we kind of had some conversation about it today as this was really kind of trending. And, for me, I don't believe in the pay-for-play so much. I talked to guys before and some guys that are in media now that were former athletes. And, you get a 50-50 take on that a lot of times, but I think a lot of the guys, they appreciated the fact that, it wasn't a pay-for-play situation. And the reason why I bring that into this is because, if you're going to start doing those type of things and then restricting these guys from where they can and can't transfer, I mean, you might as well call them contract workers, because that's really what it comes down to. I think you kind of start seeing things of you start losing the amateurism of this when you start doing that. And not only that, I kind of question what if he's transferring to a school that has a major that he's interested in? What if he's transferring to a school for other reasons outside of it being a school that's in direct competition with the university you've been with? So for me, I feel like I kind of feel like this has raised a really large stink, but it's also raised, I think, a lot of eyebrows, and it's a topic that we have to discuss and think if there's anything that needs to be changed in that model.
We also bring in Will Gunter from Fox Sports. They're in Columbia and Greenville, South Carolina. Hey, Will, how you doing tonight?
Hey, good to see you guys. How you doing?
Doing just fine. So before we get to South Carolina talk, we're raising the issue that Kirby Smart brought up in regards to player movement around the nation and from campus to campus, and their ability to transfer, and whether the coaches should have any say in that. So what's your say in this one, Will?
And I apologize. I've missed what's been said. My initial thought, I think it's a case-by-case basis. In the situation for Kirby Smart with Mark Richt, I'm pro-player anytime you get a coach that leaves. It's wildly unfair that a coach can up and leave without penalty, but we make a player, or the NCAA makes a player have to sit out a year of eligibility, or in this case with what's happened with Kirby Smart and A.J. Terman, potentially even lose a year of eligibility if indeed he wanted to transfer to, in this case, Miami. Listen, the stipend is one thing, I get it, but there's no compensation here. I do think that you have to be very careful and very selective with each and every process to not open the door to constant recruiting, even when a player is enrolled at a university. But in the case like this, I think when you have a coaching change or a coach is fired, every player should be allowed to transfer if necessary without penalty. And if that's what A.J. Terman wants to do and go to Miami, you know what? He should be allowed to do it without penalty.
David, I think I've got a pretty good clue on where you side on this one. What's the deal?
Pretty much the same with these guys, and a lot of this comes down to when a player transfer is more than likely it's not a superstar player. It's a guy who's not getting a lot of playing time, and I've always went back to the point of why does it matter where he goes? If he wasn't good enough to play on your team, why would you be afraid of him going somewhere else? Yeah, there's a principle behind it of, yes, we don't want guys just up and leaving whenever they don't feel the right or don't feel like working to get the starting position. But some guys are not going to see the field. So why is a coach holding these guys back to, maybe further their chance? Maybe they get a better opportunity somewhere else to help their draft stock, in the later years of their career. And I don't see how coaches can just sit there and tell guys you can go here, you can't go there. It should be open. It should be unrestricted. You can't hold these players back, as these guys have said they're not getting paid, as what we know of. But these guys most of the guys transfer are not the stars. So what are these coaches afraid of letting these guys go somewhere else and play?
Okay, let's look at the student side of things. And what Chad alluded to was, let's say a particular player is a very academic-oriented guy, and he changes a major, and he's got a better opportunity at another university that specializes in that major. Let's say the player is very football-minded, and for many of the reasons that you guys state, you would think it would be difficult to get to the next level, the NFL, if you can't make it at your university. But we know what kind of talent is stockpiled at places like Alabama and LSU in particular. We saw Matt Castle start a string of football games in the NFL after he couldn't get on the field at USC. So there are examples like that, like we did not see 15, 20 years ago, of guys not being able to step on the field and be very productive in college, but somehow make their way to the NFL, and it speaks to the imbalance of power in college football. I can't imagine that we can't give that freedom to a player, but as I believe you stated today, David, on the Twitter chain there, is that these coaches can pretty much up and leave and do whatever they want, regardless of what they said yesterday. And in addition to that, they're contractually obligated to fulfill a contract, and that seems to typically be worked out in some way, shape, or form. Maybe they miss out on a contract extension or a bonus and miss out on future guaranteed money, but the coaches up and leave, and they're contractually committed, and they're adults, and I would hate to bring the NCAA even further into this, but if there could be some type of rules and regulations placed on coaches contacting players, much like the recruiting situation, once they're enrolled at another university. I would hate, again, to bring the NCAA into further power to be able to legislate this stuff, but that might become an issue, and something that would have to be legislated is the contact between a coach and another coach's player. All right, well, we're going to tee up on some South Carolina football. We talked it a couple weeks ago when we had you on. It's always a good time getting you on here talking some South Carolina. So what's the latest from Gamecock camp? You've been in camp here for, 10 or 12 days.
Well, it's 5 practices. It's fascinating because for 12 years you've had offensive-minded Steve Spurrier show up to the post-practice press conference and talk about how bad the offense is and how great the defense is. And yesterday you had defensive-minded Will Muschamp do the exact opposite, which was kind of pretty funny given the quarterback situation that South Carolina is currently enduring. But you had Will Muschamp saying that maybe him and Travaris Robinson might have to line up as the safeties, and the defense had a long way to go, as opposed to the offense, which he then continued to praise, despite the fact that quarterback's a massive question mark, receiver's a question mark. So for starters, it's a fascinating 180 on what we've seen from spring practice the previous 11 years. With that being said, it really is an interesting time here in Columbia because Steve Spurrier did things entirely different than 98% of the coaches do in college football, and that's that Steve Spurrier basically said, you want to come watch practice, fans, media, opposing coach, anybody, y'all just come on in and watch and check out what we're doing. Nothing's been open to the media or the fans under Will Muschamp. He'll have 2 practices this week, or next week, the 29th and the 31st, that are open, and then the spring game as well. So what we're getting right now is only stuff that Muschamp wants to tell us, or that the assistant coaches or the players want to tell us. So what we've learned so far is that practices have been much more up-tempo, they've been more physical. I'm sure this goes on at other universities, but Will Muschamp yesterday alluded to the fact that they're in their first scrimmage on Saturday. The quarterbacks were live, meaning that they were allowed to be hit, and they wanted to see how they handled that role. But at the end of the day, we're still learning, and all we're taking away is what Muschamp wants to tell us or what the players want to tell us. And if you go on that, and solely that, the quarterbacks are throwing a whole lot of interceptions, and they're learning to play at a whole new tempo. So that's kind of where we stand, at least through 5 practices, with another one slated for tomorrow, a half scrimmage on Saturday, 2 practices next week, and a full scrimmage the following Saturday.
Okay, Will, while we've got you, we want to take advantage. So, David, anything for Will on the Gamecocks?
Yeah, going and seeing what, I got to see what Muschamp did, firsthand here in Florida, and then we saw what he did last year with the Auburn defense. And, you could say the Auburn defense going into last year and the South Carolina defense going into this year in similar situations where they really, really struggled. And, part of the reason Muschamp was brought in. Who are the guys that can, it may take a while, it may take mid-season before this defense can kind of turn around, but who are the guys who could maybe spearhead that and help lead the charge for the South Carolina defense to take form?
David, I think, and in talking with people over the weekend, again, I've not been able to observe a practice, and you try to glean what information you can. I think the starters, the first 11, both offensive and defensive, really the first 22 are very talented, actually, to compare it to Auburn. I think the surprise, to answer your question, is going to be the defensive line, whether it's Marquavius Lewis, Kelsey Griffin, a defensive tackle, Marquavius Lewis, a senior defensive end that came was the #1 junior college defensive player in the previous recruiting cycle, and Kelsey Griffin, a big-time defensive tackle who's entering his senior season, have been healthy this spring, and it's going to start with the defensive line. It's fascinating right now to watch Muschamp recruit because you can see the emphasis on both lines of scrimmage. And South Carolina has recruited; they haven't played well. Nobody would question that. And I don't want to knock the previous coaching staff, but having Lance Thompson now coaching the defensive line, where you see Marquavius Lewis, again, a guy who was wanted out of junior college by pretty much everybody, Kelsey Griffin, who's a big-time prospect, Dexter Wideman, who Jimbo Fisher spent a full day up here right before signing day 2 years ago trying to convince not to go to South Carolina and go to Florida State. You have Dante Sawyer, who's out this spring. There's talent there. There's actually talent there if you go on the recruiting rankings. And so I think when you start with the front 4, that's going to be the difference because they've got to get to the quarterback and there's talent. And I look at Marquavius Lewis as the guy that has got to make the biggest difference. Has got to be a true edge pass rusher. Now, you back up from that, the guy that's being talked about right now is, again, another big-time recruit that's entering his junior year, Bryson Allen Williams, out of Cedar Grove High School in Georgia. It was a guy that came in with a lot of hype. Alabama made a late push on signing day. Georgia made a late push, and he chose at the time to stick with South Carolina. Sky Moore is out this spring dealing with a neck injury. And then you look at the secondary. The kid that I think has to make an impact in the secondary, they're waiting on to see if he can get enrolled, is Jamarcus King, a junior college defensive back that's about 6'1", can play safety, can play defensive back, and they're going to need help there. And I'll be honest with you, David, you're very familiar, maybe more familiar with the other guy that I'm about to mention because it's a mystery. It's top secret information up here, J.C. Jackson, who a lot of people think is going to end up at South Carolina come June after a prior stint with Muschamp in Florida. You know well he was acquitted of the charges, and people believe that he'll end up here. So unfortunately, when you go through the defensive group, I think the talent's there, defensive line. I think it's there at the linebacker. The secondary, they're kind of waiting on whether it's J.C. Jackson or Jamarcus King. Those are the guys that have to come in and make an impact in the fall.
Yeah, and I'll jump in with J.C. Jackson just right quick before we do that. If as good as we say he is, if he was at Florida coming up this spring and fall, he probably would be the starting cornerback opposite Jalen Tabor. So yes, he's that good, and Will Muschamp can definitely build his secondary around him.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. Again, I cover recruiting. I go and I speak with recruits, and I don't do it like I used to. The information has been hard to come by with J.C. Jackson, and it's borderline top. We have a better chance of getting information right now about the Roswell incident than we do with what exactly is going on with J.C. Jackson. But it is something that's very potential, and like you said, would be an upgrade. Chris Lamons, Rico McWilliams, Jamarcus King. There's a young man, DJ Smith, who I know they were very high on. safety, the safety position is going to be the key for South Carolina this year. Really could make or break that defense.
Anything for Will, Chad?
Yeah, well, let's talk about the offensive side of the ball. Curious with your thoughts on how Roper is going to come in and what his effect's going to be with the South Carolina offense. Are the pieces there? What's your production? I mean, what do you expect the production to be this year? And what are your learning curves, your expectations for this South Carolina offense under year one with Roper?
You know, I don't think you can go in with any expectations. There's a million questions. I think you're comfortable with the offensive line. Again, if you look across, if you're going to go strictly by recruiting rankings and the people who believe they get paid a lot of money to judge these kids, South Carolina's offensive line is looks to be in great shape. Going with Christian Pellich, who was a big-time recruit, with Zach Bailey, with Donnell Stanley. Corey Helms was a freshman All-American at Wake Forest before transferring in. Alan Knott has started before, and Mason Zandy has experience. So the offensive line is going to be a strength. But outside of that, they have to find a running back. And whether it's David Williams, who came in highly regarded, whether it's Jamari Smith, who's bounced back and forth, maybe it's Rico Dowell, a top-flight freshman who will arrive in the fall, they're going to have to run the ball because, quite frankly, you're looking at a situation with either Perry Orth or Brandon McElwain that South Carolina will not be able to go out and throw the football 25 or 30 times a game this year to win. If they get into a shootout, it's highly unlikely that they win. It's more likely that they throw 4 or 5 interceptions. I think the receivers in time will be good, but you've got 4 guys coming in from the recruiting class, going with Brian Edwards, who's already on campus and going through spring practice trying to recover from the knee injury. So there's no doubt the quarterback situation is the biggest one. We had the radio show today. We compared it not in talent because that would be asinine, but to the situation that Clemson went through 2 years ago with Deshaun Watson and Cole Stout. You knew Deshaun Watson was the better quarterback. You knew he was going to be the future of the quarterback position there. How long did you allow the Cole Stout to go on, a senior, because he'd earned the right, been through the workouts? South Carolina's in a very similar situation with Perry Orth and Brandon McElwain. How long do you allow probably the more talented player to sit on the sideline because he's a true freshman and allow the senior who's earned the right to start, in my opinion? I think always if you have a senior who's doing everything right, has the right to start. They open on the road at Vanderbilt. But to answer your question, the offense is they're going to have to win with defense this year. This is going to have to be a Spurrier-esque type. Let's win 17-14, final running back, and ground and pound. And that running back situation makes that questionable.
Well, to answer your question, Will, Dabo Swinney didn't wait long to pull Cole Stout. The only reason that he played substantial time in Deshaun Watson's freshman season is that Deshaun Watson had 2 major injuries during that season. He was able to recover from the first one and come back, and then he came back late in the season. But when he could be on the field, he was on the field. So Dabo Swinney definitely went with talent over experience and tenure in that situation. Well, you got to promise
Well, hold on
us.
now.
Yeah, go to it.
Well, what I was going to say, what we compared it to, they opened that year. I don't know if you guys remember, they opened on the road at Georgia.
Yep.
Cole Stout got the start. Deshaun Watson came in and threw a couple great passes, but they went with Cole Stout. They lost the game. Todd Gurley had a great second half. Nick Chubb announced himself to the year, to the country. And then they came home, a meaningless game, App State or somebody, and they took on, and Cole Stout played that game. Deshaun started the 4th game that year against North Carolina at home. South Carolina will open at Vanderbilt and at Mississippi State before coming home for the 3rd game of the year against East Carolina. How long do you let Perry Orth and Brandon McElwain battle it out? Because I do think McElwain would now be the better quarterback. So it'll make for a fascinating kind of conversation as we move through both the next 10 practices, the next 9 practices, the spring game, and then on through the summer.
I was just going to say, Will, before we let you go, that you're safe for the next 5 months. But once we start playing games, we're going to have to do better than 3-9 because we want you on the show a lot. But with 14 teams, we got to get the top teams in the standings on. So we need better than 3-9 out of the Gamecocks.
Good news, boys. I can talk anything. So if the Gamecocks are struggling out the gate, we'll talk. We'll talk Alabama. we'll talk LSU. We'll talk about the governor trying to take LSU football away, and LSU says no, don't worry. We'll keep Johnny Jones and apply that money we would have used for Johnny Jones to the football program. Don't, Johnny's fine. Don't ignore what just happened in basketball. So anytime you guys want to talk, I think it's going to be a fun year in the SEC. I will say this. I think that South Carolina could win 8 games, not because of the talent, but I think the SEC East is down this year. You look at Florida with their quarterback situation, Georgia, Kentucky, Missouri, even South Carolina playing Mississippi State, who has a quarterback issue to start in the second game of the year. I don't think South Carolina starting 22 are bad. They're not good enough to go out and win the SEC East, but they're not bad. It's going to be a depth issue. That's going to be what holds the Gamecocks back in 2016.
That means your team's going to go 5-3 in the conference.
Well, I didn't call them wins. Now we're not making predictions. We do a radio show. I got people that call in all the time and think I'm some kind of crystal ball reader. But I say, listen, they go 3-9. They can go 9-3. We said the same thing last year, and daggone if they didn't go 3-9. So I won't make a prediction this year.
All right. Well, if we give you full reign to talk about every team in the conference that you want to talk about, even when your team's crashing and burning at like 1-8, then we're going to need a hard and fast prediction out of you in August, just like the rest of us. We're all going to put our necks on the line, and it's not going to be, they could go 8-4. It's going to be 8-4. That's the deal.
Oh, listen, I wrote it last year. I had Texas A&M winning the West. I love their quarterback situation. I didn't realize how much of a bonfire that would end up being. So I have no problem with predictions.
Good stuff. Will Gunter from Fox Sports in Columbia, South Carolina, also Greenville, South Carolina, covering the Gamecocks, covering the entire SEC as he lets us know there. Definitely, I've had Will on for a number of segments involving the East, the West, all over the place. He can cover it all. Will, we appreciate it. You can hang on with us if you'd like, but we're just going to talk a little Arkansas football and kind of give the microphone to Chad here to talk up the Hogs.
I'm going to slip out. I got an early day tomorrow. You boys have fun. Let's definitely do it again.
Sounds good, Will.
Take care.
All right, Chad, it's all you.
Yeah, well, you got to set me up a little bit, Mark.
Yeah.
I thought I already did set you up.
That's not a setup. What is that?
I got quick two questions, but one kind of maybe just out of the blue, and I don't know, maybe Arkansas fans do talk about it. Like, how much or any pressure on Bielema and what he needs to do this year?
Pressure-wise, man, I don't think there's any pressure on Bielema at Arkansas right now, to be honest with you, because of the fact of I don't think outside of maybe those that were kind of close to the program here at Arkansas realize how much of a dumpster fire John L. Smith left behind whenever he left here during that interim that he was here. Bielema came in and even openly admitted after the 3-9 season that, man, maybe I bit off a little more than I could chew in a press conference, and it alluded to that. And I really think that was true. I mean, I think he thought he had more here because it was an SEC school. He thought there'd be more depth. Reality of it is I don't think that was the case. I think once he got in and started trying to put scheme and things together, he realized that just wasn't what he had going on. So, to answer your question, I mean, if you look at them, they're trending up every year. Recruiting class, top 25 recruiting class this year. You got a blue chip 5-star in McTell Agim, Sosa that's on campus right now, who actually got some practices in prior to the Liberty Bowl. This guy's, man, he's a beast, fellas. I've talked to him and shook his hand and had a few conversations with him. He's an absolute just huge kid. He came in about 270 or so. Now he's up to about 290, and he possibly is going to be playing that R position, which is what Trey Flowers, who plays for the Patriots now, played at defensive end position. So I think with the staff that you've got and what they've been able to do, David, to answer your question, I think that really he's not under any pressure. I know some people may think that, but this guy's got a clear 5 years.
Yeah, so playing off the pressure thing, what are the expectations? Because he goes 0-8, he wins a couple games. You've seen the steady improvement. It's been very obvious. But kind of like Butch Jones in the East, I think jumping a team, and Arkansas was a little bit further down than Tennessee, but when you jump a team 3 or 4 wins and get to that 8-win total, that's great. You're 8-4. But to go from 8 wins to 10 or 11, those next 2 or 3 teams that you need to beat are serious. They're top 15 teams in that conference, especially in that division. So it's a quantum leap from here, even if it's only a couple more wins.
Yeah, I think what you have to look at, though, I agree with your assessment completely, but I think what makes it a little bit different and what the caveat is to that this year is the fact that there's really only 2 teams in the SEC that are bringing back experienced quarterbacks. The quarterback position, even more so in the West, but granted, Alabama has shown that they've been able to do things. Okay, we know that. They can bring in Joe Blow, come in there, and he's going to be able to get things done. It's just the way the system works for him. I think that outside of an Alabama, maybe with, it depends on how much work Brandon Harris puts in at LSU, considering they do have some extra help. Cam has some extra help now. That being said, I think if you look at it, if Arkansas is going to have a shot, it would be this year. You look at their home schedule, Mark. Their home schedule is very favorable. They get Alabama at home, LSU at home, Ole Miss at home. They get Florida at home. They've got a very, very favorable schedule for them this year, and I think that being that that's the case, if you're going to do it, despite the questions on the offensive side of the ball that they do have, which are plenty, they look to be able to reload on that side of the ball, which is something you would not normally say about an Arkansas team in the past several years, at least going on 5. It's been a while. Even when Petrino was here as head coach, you had some questions outside of maybe because you knew Mallett was redshirting, or had to sit out a year. You knew what you had with Ryan Mallett, so that's maybe a little bit of a different story. But that being said, I mean it's been a while, but this team, I think this year could very well find itself in an opportunistic situation where it could maybe get those extra 1 or 2 wins because of the quarterback situations at Mississippi State, Texas A&M. So I think that could be an opportunity for them, and Missouri at the end of the year. So as their cross-divisional rival. So I think it's highly possible. It's possible. I'm not willing to go there yet. I need to see more.
What's also interesting about the parallel between what Bielema did at Wisconsin and what he's in the process of doing at Arkansas is not just the style of play that you see on the field with the big, massive offensive line and the power running game and play action pass, and that being the kind of sequential order of the way he wants to attack, and that being the blueprint at Wisconsin, but the blueprint in terms of developing the program and going to a state that is at a disadvantage compared to its competition within the division, and more so in the Big Ten, the entire conference, not so much the Western Division, but being in that place where you can hope to get a top 25 class, and that's about where you're going to max out probably, but you're gunning for the big boys. You're gunning for Ohio State, Michigan State, Michigan. If you're Wisconsin, you're gunning for, and pretty successful, as Wisconsin has been for the past 15 years under Barry Alvarez, then Bielema. And then at Arkansas, kind of the same formula. You're really going to have to coach them up, and you're really going to have to hope that your style of play is such a change-up from what everybody else sees, and your guys play over their heads, and you, again, coach them up, and you have a great coaching staff to win against a little bit better talent.
I think, maybe here's the thing with that assessment. Maybe in years past, more so, but I think what's going to shock some people in the coming years is the amount of depth that Arkansas actually has on campus. There's some very talented depth up there, especially in the secondary, that defensive line. I think they've got 9 returning starters this year. And again, like I said, they've got the 5-star that's already on campus. And you're right, though, with your assessment about the recruiting. One of the things I've talked to a blue blood, several boosters and things that have been around this program for a very long time, and they've talked about the fact that was one of the hardest things for Arkansas to overcome being in the SEC is recruiting, getting kids to actually get to campus. It's very difficult because Fayetteville is kind of out of the way. It's not really close to any major big city, although the area up there in northwest Arkansas is growing. It's a very fast-growing area, but that being said, it's not like where you go to College Station, you're not far from Houston, or you go to Tuscaloosa and you're not very far from Birmingham. things of those nature. I mean, you've got something that you can kind of relate to. Even with Ole Miss at Oxford, they go to Memphis. So, I mean, there's some things there that appeal. Within Fayetteville, it's not that way. So it is hard to get those kids. But you look, Mark, this year especially, look at this recruiting class. I think this recruiting class, in my opinion, for 2016 was a real feeling for what you're going to see in the future for Arkansas. They were competing for some 5-stars, including Christian Fulton, which ended up, he went to Florida and Arkansas his last 2 official visits, ended up committing to LSU, but he was really hard-pressed with Arkansas, so much so that his dad didn't want Bielema to come down and visit him. His dad is a staunch LSU guy, and he did not want Arkansas in the house at all, so it was kind of a unique storyline. But that being said, Arkansas found itself battling for, like you had talked about, battling with the big dogs for some recruits. And I think that's something that SEC people might have to get used to seeing with Bielema there, because he is going to be able to go out, attract the kids' attention, especially on the offensive line. Granted, you saw Pittman leave and jump to Georgia. Now you've got Kurt Anderson in, who's with the Buffalo Bills, who's automatically just taken off. He's already gotten 2017 four-star offensive lineman commit since he's been here. So I think that things are turning the table at Arkansas. It's just, I equate it a lot to the Patriots, Mark. They've built a dynasty, and they've done it over time. Belichick wasn't just coming in and knocking down doors. It took time to build a dynasty, and you see what they've done at Alabama. It took several years before Nick Saban got to that championship. I think it's what Bielema is going to have to do at Arkansas. If he wants to beat those guys, he's got to build up the depth first.
Did it take either one of them that long? Saban comes in 07, 09, he's got an undefeated team.
Yeah, I know, man.
9, he wins the Super Bowl in 01. It seemed like a 2-year plan to me.
Yeah.
No,
yeah.
but
well, they come off
well taken,
three,
definitely.
Right? Yeah.
Definitely well taken. So we want to remind everyone that we're here every Wednesday night on Blab. I'm sorry. We're not on Blab. We gave that a shot and just didn't work out for us. We're on Google Hangouts, but most importantly, you can find us on Twitter. You can also find the show at Mark Rogers TV, and we've got plans for all sorts of big doings here in the next few weeks. So we will unveil those plans as we go along for SEC Breakdown and a number of outlets going forward. All right, gentlemen,
Dave,
spring football.
Yeah, I think David had a question there.
Yeah, I wanted to bring up just one more on-field thing with Arkansas. Hunter Henry going to be tough to replace. It kind of seems like the security blanket for the quarterbacks. Who will it be? Jeremy Sprinkle, who steps into that role for Hunter Henry as another tight end, or is it another position? Is it a running back who can catch out of the backfield, or is it a receiver who's going to emerge to kind of be that security blanket for the quarterbacks?
Yeah, you make a good point there. Hunter Henry is just going to be tough. You knew he was special from his freshman year. After winning the Mackey Award this year, it wasn't a surprise that he went pro. I think it's kind of, what do you do if you're a tight end from that point forward? You mentioned Jeremy Sprinkle. He's definitely going to be your number one guy. Jeremy Sprinkle with Hunter Henry was a lot of times overshadowed. His athleticism, he reminds you a lot of O.J. Howard as far as athleticism goes from Alabama. But he's a hard-nosed tight end, so he will get in there and scrap and block. He's the type of guy that will get in on the kickouts. I mean, he's just he's very physical, but, of course, you have to be with Bielema's system as a tight end. You're going to be right in the mix of things. So you look at him, you look at Will Gregg, the younger brother of NFL pro tight end Chris Gregg, who plays, coincidentally, for the Buffalo Bills. And so he's here on campus as well. Another guy, 6'5", 6'6", tight end, big boy, who's put on several pounds since he's been on campus now. They redshirted him last year and got him ready. There are several guys. You got to remember, the year before last, Arkansas had 3 4-star tight ends brought in one class. So they've got depth there at that position. It's an area where they could actually take a couple of these guys like a Will Gregg and put him out and split him out wide a little bit and still have 2 tight ends on the field. That's the type of mismatches you're going to see out of this offense going forward. And one of the reasons why it was the second best passing offense in the SEC this last year was because of the utilization of the tight end, which helped to open things up for the other receivers. And you got to remember, too, guys, their top two of their top receivers were injured last season, with Cornelius being out, and of course Keon Hatcher went out early with a foot injury. and those guys are back. They're about 5 deep right now with wide receivers that they can rotate in at any given time, and I think it's probably going to be pretty interesting to see what translates out of that passing game going forward for the quarterback. But you talked about safety, David. What I'm concerned more about is the running back position. Simply because you have Cody Walker coming back, who had about 300-plus yards last year. You've got less than 30% of your rushing production coming back this year. That's not a lot. You've got a freshman who was injured last year in Raleigh Williams, who looked really promising before he got hurt. We suspect he'll be back this fall, but not sure. With that injury, it was pretty severe that he had suffered to his neck. So that we'll see if he comes back and in what kind of shape he's going to be in. They did move former New Jersey standout quarterback, dual threat quarterback, Dewalt Mitchell, who was moved to wide receiver, has now been moved to running back to kind of help with that depth because they lost an Alex Collins and Jonathan Williams. That's a pretty hard duo to get past. And so they lost those guys. Then you've got incoming freshman Devwall Whaley, which they think will contribute right away. Bielema is known for rotating 3 deep at that position. You saw it at Wisconsin, the three-headed monster they had back in 2010. I keep waiting to see that here at Arkansas. I'm waiting to see if they can accumulate a three-headed monster like they did that year here in the SEC. If they're able to duplicate that in the SEC, that's going to be insane. But for those that don't know, that was almost a 3,000-yard rushing season, I believe, Mark. You could probably look that up for me and tell me, but I think that was insane to do. If they could do that here, I'll be pretty interested to see. They've got the talent there, but it's actually pretty shallow if you look at it. Cody Walker's not a guy that can sidestep you. He's a big 250-pound, 6'2" running back. He's not a guy that's going to be able to shimmy and shake like Alex Collins that could bounce back and make something happen out of nothing. He's a straightforward runner. He's downhill runner. If you catch him at the ankles behind the line of scrimmage, it's over. So I'm curious to see who's going to lead that running back. That's the one that I'm more concerned about when it comes to having a brand new quarterback than any other position right now.
Yeah, I'm looking that up right here, Chad. I got it right here. You had Monte Ball, you had James White, and you had, of course, Melvin Gordon, who ran for 2,500 yards a few years later. And they were just like 20 or 50 or 60 yards away from the third guy having 1,000 yards. That's all they did is just ram it down your throat. Behind him, like 3 guys that went to the NFL.
Duplicate that here. If they can make that, I think that's Bielema's goal. But with the success Enos has had in the passing game, I don't know if that's something he'll veer away from. Because with the previous offensive coordinator with Chaney, he didn't really give Chaney the full reins. Enos has had full reins, and you can tell from about game 2 or 3 on that was the case. Because of, if you go back and watch the film and look at the progression of the passing game, you can see that Brandon Allen just exponentially went up as the season went along. So as far as quarterback is concerned, I think you're pretty good for Arkansas. Again, I go back to the running back, and, of course, losing the entire left side of your offensive line. It will be pretty interesting to see how they replace that because, to be quite honest with you, and this is another topic we can get into at another time, but I think this 2016 recruiting class definitely bombed on picking up offensive linemen. If you go back and look, they didn't really get the 4 guys that they wanted. They got 3 guys, 2 of which were 3-stars, and they've got a JUCO guy in Malone that's already on campus, but really didn't hit it out like they thought they would. I think the immediate impact of Pittman leaving was felt, but going forward with Kurt Anderson, I don't know if that'll be a problem.
Here you go, boys. John Clay. Forgot about John Clay. My goodness, 1,012.
Clay was a freshman, I believe.
Yeah, he was a bulldozer. This was before Melvin Gordon. Melvin Gordon was on the it must have been a year before, 2010. So, yeah, they were 4 yards away from having 3 guys. They had 1,052 with James White, 1,012 with John Clay, Monte Ball, who gained 1,000 yards in the NFL. Close to it, 996, and those 3 guys scored 46 touchdowns rushing that season, 18, 14, and 14.
That's what I'm talking about. If you can duplicate that in the SEC, that's jaw-dropping.
Yeah, well, that's not going to be duplicated in the SEC.
The crazy thing is, you remember those guys? Those weren't a lot of goal line touchdowns either. Those were scampers, for 20 yards out.
Yeah, somebody got AOT, butt on the turf with those runs. But here's the thing: what's quietly gone about at Arkansas, despite the lack of success, which a lot of times gets overshadowed because of being in the Western Division, with the teams you have to compete with there in the Western Division. If you go and look, even with the 3-9 season, look at the productivity at the running game for Arkansas the last 3 years. It's right on par with some of your better teams in the country. They just haven't been able to get the other part of the offense going. Well, now they've got that. Can they get the defense right? Last year's defense was absolutely atrocious. First in passing defense in the SEC conference, which knocked him down to the number 11 total defense because their passing defense was so bad, which in part had to do with the lack of depth at the linebacking position. They got ate up on post routes, spread themselves out. They couldn't get, you go back and you look at the Auburn game, late in that game, they go into OT and you look at it, Sean White was able to really spread them thin. And when he got to moving with his legs, that's when Arkansas really felt the pain. So they actually picked up several guys this year's class that are linebackers linebackers is what they do. They're not guys that they're bringing in from defensive ends or whatnot, which they had to do last year. They had D ends playing in the linebacking position because they had no depth. And so this year that is. I'm looking to see how this defense can bounce back from having such a bad year last year. It was to the point where Arkansas fans who loved Rob Smith a year ago were ready to see him get fired after last season. There were some fans that were on that bus because the defense had gotten so bad. And the talent is there. They're very deep in the secondary. So I'm curious to see how that translates after this last year.
All right, guys. A couple things I'm looking at the next. Certainly, this Georgia quarterback situation. I don't think it means a whole lot right now, but they say Bryce Ramsey's getting first-team snaps over Grayson Lambert at this point. Ramsey's a guy that has all the tools, can make all the throws, doesn't apparently take charge of the huddle and isn't necessarily, he comes in and does his work, but he's not the necessarily alpha dog driven type, and that's what they would like to see out of him. Kirby Smart made the comment this week about Lorenzo Carter, that he's not tough enough, needs to be tougher. We know he's got plenty of talent to succeed in this league, and has, definitely. And then Auburn, they're going to go with a live quarterback more than they have the past couple years, because they thought with Nick Marshall a few years ago that running those live drills with a live quarterback, and for as much as the quarterback needs to be dedicated to the running game, especially if John Franklin wins the job, that having that live contact more often is going to help them have the more fluid type of exchanges with the running backs and the flow in the offense that they like to have, and the tempo that they had going back to 2013 that dropped off in 14 and then fell off the cliff in 2015. And, this is a lot of kind of spring type talk, but it's coming out of a lot of players that they like playing for Kevin Steele on the defensive side for Auburn over Will Muschamp. Not quite as much intensity, not as quite as much yelling, and we'll see if that matters and what that really means going forward.
I like Franklin for Auburn. I really do. I think he comes in, he brings the speed element that Malzahn's going to want, and if anything we've learned, he loves that guy that can be the option quarterback for him and use his legs and spread you. And I think that's really what will happen here. I just don't think with Johnson and White you're going to get what you want production-wise, anything similar to what you had with Nick Marshall. He wasn't the best passer, but, man, that run offense there was no way. It was a downhill, down your throat, consistent pace. It was so up-tempo. And it would just literally physically wear you down by the end of the game. And I'm curious if with Franklin being the new name, if this is the guy he goes with. I think it is ultimately. I'd watch that one. I think that's who you'll end up seeing as the starter.
I wanted to come up with some numbers, didn't quite get to it, but you talk about serious rushing numbers. Look at 2013 Auburn. and consider the competition. Consider they ran for 500 yards in the SEC championship game against two NFL defensive ends and linebackers on that team, and they did it against Bama. They had over 300 yards against that defense rushing the football. That's one of the better running efforts I've seen for a season out of a team playing that kind of schedule in a long, long time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All right, guys, I know we're all pumped up here. We got SEC Breakdown coming your way every Wednesday night, and we've got big things in store for the future of this this platform. So more details to come. For Chad Neipling and for David Waters, we will catch you next time. And again, catch us on Twitter at SEC Breakdown, and try to keep up because we've got changes. They are a coming. So see you next time.